With me to talk more about all of this is Samantha Harding, an environmentalist from the Break the Bag Habit campaign, Gareth English, a consumer psychologist who advises companies on how to change their customers' behaviour at the till, and Jane Bickerstaff from Inkpen. It's an industry body whose members include packaging manufacturers and retailers like Tesco, Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer. Thank you all for coming in. Samantha, first of all, why have you been campaigning for this?
Well, we knew that the carrier bag that we still use on the high street can often end up littered, and that's often the branded bags that you showed in your clips, also ones that come from the smaller retailers, the sort of the ubiquitous blue, white, black ones. And once they do enter the environment, they're a huge pollutant. As you mentioned, they don't degrade very quickly, they stay in the environment for a long time, they're very visible, they're often very brightly coloured, and they also have a terrible impact on wildlife, particularly in the marine environment.
Jane, you don't believe they do pose an environmental threat. Why not?
Well, we're anti-littering, but we think that all littering needs to be addressed, not just one item of it. And frankly, very few carrier bags get littered. If you look at the statistics, the Keep It and Tidy's last survey showed that in only 11% of the sites that they surveyed, there were carrier bags. Strangely, just one below vehicle parts. There were more vehicle parts littered than carrier bags. But we think whatever it is that litter needs to be addressed.
If it's going to raise a lot of money for charity, though, £90 million potentially, and it will change people's behaviour, as we see in places where the bag charge has already come in, isn't that a good thing?
It's not a bad thing, you're absolutely right. The disappointing thing is that the government has implemented it with some exemptions. So we're still going to have other bags out there that in the wrong hands, in some irresponsible person's hands, could get littered. We think they should have kept it simple and brought in the same rules that apply in Wales and Scotland.
Gareth, we went through the figures there and behaviour has changed in the places where the charge has already come in. Why does it take a charge for us to change our habits? Because we already are aware of the arguments around plastic bag use.
Absolutely. Well, the challenge is that we have the cost for us is something nebulous in the future. So what the charge allows us to do is to bring that problem right here to the point at the till where I'm paying. So we're given a punishment at that point, and that's going to be effective in some ways. I think the challenge can be, as you're indicating, to be really effective, a punishment has to happen on time and every time. And this is not going to be consistent, so that means that the habit that we want our consumers to get into is going to take a little bit longer to bed in.
Yeah, I mean, on that, Samantha, it's absolutely clear in England, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but there are so many exemptions in England. Yeah. Might it not have the same impact?
I mean, that's our position. We really welcome the charge. We think it's fantastic that the government's committed to bring it in, and it's great that we're going towards a step that will reduce the type of litter that is in our environment. But the fact that we don't have a universal charge like they have in Wales and Scotland, where there's a charge on all bags by all retailers, it makes it very simple for all of us to understand. It makes it much simpler for retailers as well. So we really hope that once this charge is embedded from today onwards, the government will look to review it as soon as possible and overturn those exemptions.
Why don't shops just sort of go back to the old ways, Jane? Using the cardboard boxes that the goods arrived at the store in to be used to take away shopping, and paper bags. Paper bags are greener, aren't they?
Well, looking at the weather today, paper bags have their limitations. If I was going shopping on the bus, I would want something that would keep the goods that I buy dry and would be strong enough for me to take on. The Environment Agency did a major study of a whole range of carrier bags a few years ago, and they concluded that the most effective way to take your groceries home is by using the thin plastic carrier bag.
How do people react, Gareth, when something that we're used to suddenly changes? We are used to getting free plastic bags, not having to think before we leave the house about taking something with us, although obviously a lot of people already do it. But I mean, there are predictions that it could cause till rage. Do you think that might happen?
Well, I think one of the differences that's going to come in is due to the person that we are. So some of the work that we do is looking at different types of shoppers. So we know that about 10% of shoppers are what we call dreamers, and they're very spontaneous. They buy things on the spur of the moment. So for them, thinking about what they're going to do in advance is more difficult. About 40% of people are what we call personal shoppers. Now, they like their habits. They tend to do the same thing again. So breaking that habit for them is going to be difficult. But once we get
so
them
they might be the group susceptible to till rage?
They might be, yes. And for them, it's the personal relationship. So it's going to be up to the shops to explain this to them in a way that makes sense.
Okay, Lorraine on Facebook, they pretend it's being done to help the environment. Then why not ban plastic carrier bags and use paper one? It's the lies told that anger me. Sean on Facebook, what proof do we have that this money will help the environment? Vicky on Facebook, perhaps it'll stop us all from being lazy and thoughtless about the world. Margie on Facebook, I take my own bags when shopping. If you need a bag, get a bag for life. Samantha, do you think paper bags are better?
No, Jane's right. The study shows that when you look at paper bags, they would call it sort of the full life cycle of the bag. The real problem comes once the bag's been produced and then has to be transported. So you then have to, because they're larger and heavier than the plastic bags, they end up having a bigger impact on greenhouse emissions because you need more trucks to move them around. Obviously, they're from a more sustainable source, but in the round, they're not as good. And as Jane mentioned, they're not very good for reuse. And that's what we would also advocate, that if you already have bags in your house, keep reusing them as often as possible rather than taking new ones each time.
Presumably, Jane, it's not going to impact on people's shopping habits. It's not going to damage trade for supermarkets and businesses,
no,
is it?
I can't imagine it would. I mean, I absolutely agree with Sam on that. Our advice at Inkpen has always been, take a bag with you. It takes a little bit of effort to get used to it, but I mean, I've always done that. And if you do buy something spontaneously and you don't have a bag, you have to buy one, as it will be today, for 5p, and use it again. Lots of uses for carrier bags.
And Gareth, are there other ways to persuade people to change other than a 5p charge?
Absolutely. So we're using a punishment, which can work, as I said, if we're very specific about it. But we
Or you
could
could
also
think of it as an incentive rather than a punishment.
Yeah, but I guess what it is a punishment for using a bag. What we could, if we're looking at an incentive, is how could we make people feel good about doing the right thing instead of feeling bad about doing the wrong thing. So turn it into something where it's a social or an ethical bonus. We feel good about doing that. We feel good about carrying reusable bags, as opposed to being punished for doing the wrong thing.
I like this email from John. Plastic carrier bags, 5p. Supermarkets, shops should reduce our shopping bill by 10p for advertising freely for them. Plus, the bags should be stronger. And an anonymous texter, when I first started shopping for myself in 1968, we had to take our own bags. Nobody questioned this. What is wrong with people taking their own to shop? Have we all just become really lazy? I mean, you're saying it is not that difficult to remember to take to take a bag with you, but we just don't do it, do we?
But this might be the impetus that makes us do it. I mean, from our point of view, the fact that this is being done as a cure for littering is a bit of a disappointment, because we do think there's a serious litter problem in this country and that needs to be addressed. But we need to get rid of everything that's littered, not just do piecemeal things that target one item.
Is there too much of a focus on plastic bags, Samantha? Because it's very true, isn't it? It's not just plastic bags you see all over the place. And actually, even if somebody behaves really well most of the time and don't use plastic bags, there'll inevitably be an occasion when they do use them, and maybe that's the plastic bag that ends up getting blown all over the place and causing some sort of environmental harm.
Well, I don't think the fact that just having to use a carrier bag on any sort of particular occasion means it might end up being littered. I do think there are obviously lots of other types of products that do end up being littered, but I think the great thing about the carrier bag charge is that it's something that we can do. It's relatively simple. There's a lot of support for it from consumers and from retailers. Let's just enjoy the charge coming in today and move on to the next issue, dealing with other types of litter, which is certainly what I'll be doing.
And the reason for the concern around plastic bags is because they get caught in the wind and move around quite easily, rather than other litter, I guess, that just will sort of stay where it is, even if it's unsightly and shouldn't be there anyway.
Well, they get called witches' knickers, where they get caught in trees and hedgerows, but that's one of the issues. They're so visible that they then tend to attract other types of littering. And also just really the fact that they're sort of described as a single-use item, but they're made from a material that won't degrade for up to 500 years. So there's quite a strange anomaly there, that we're using something time and time again. We're taking them sort of at the checkout, but they're designed to be used for hundreds of years.
And Jane, I hear that you do dispute really the sort of the logic behind the need for a ban, but in the end the supermarkets don't feel terribly strongly about this, do they? I mean, are they particularly concerned? Are there real worries for them?
No, I mean, they've grown accustomed to it in Wales and Scotland. They'll just grow accustomed to it here. The inconvenience for them is having the slight complexity of having to explain that there are some exemptions. But hopefully everyone will get the hang of that after a while. And we really do hope. It would have been nice if the government had just followed the examples in Wales and Scotland.
And kept it simple.
Yes.
All right, well, we'll see how it unfolds. Thank you all very much, and keep your thoughts coming into us on this, and thank you for already getting in touch on that one. Also, coming up today, as Cameron pledges to press on with plans to open doctors' surgeries every day of the week, we will be asking if it'll be easier to get an appointment straight away. And what it's like to nearly hit the big time, we'll be hearing from X Factor singers on Life After the Show. First, let's bring you right up to date with our main news this morning. A police officer has been knocked down and killed by a stolen car on Merseyside. The neighbourhood patrol officer had been trying to stop the vehicle following a break-in at an estate agent's in the early hours of the morning. A murder inquiry has been launched. The government has announced it's to sell £2 billion worth of Lloyds Bank shares to members of the public. They'll get a 5% discount off the market price, and small investors seeking shares worth under £1,000 will get priority. The Chancellor has appointed the former Labour Transport Secretary Lord Adonis to chair a new independent body to plan infrastructure projects. The new body is designed to speed up major transport, housing and energy projects across the UK. Shoppers in England join the rest of the UK today in paying 5 pence for a plastic bag in supermarkets and large shops. 7.6 billion plastic bags are handed out every year, and the government is hoping to reduce that by around 80%.
We're very, very happy that the charge is coming today. It brings us in line with the rest of the UK. However, there are some subtle differences. It doesn't apply to firms of less than 250 employees, and it doesn't apply to all bags. It only applies to single-use plastic bags.
State militants have reportedly blown up another monument in the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra. The Arch of Triumph is thought to have been built around 2,000 years ago. Islamic State fighters have already destroyed 2 temples at the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Scientists have discovered a species of ancient mammal that survived the asteroid impact that led to the extinction of dinosaurs. The remains of the large rodent-like creature found in New Mexico could give clues about how mammals evolved after dinosaurs. Right, let's catch up with all the sport now and John.